And thank you all of you for joining us today. We hope to inspire your creativity by presenting some fresh ideas about the future of privacy and personalization in the luxury industry. And I want to tell you a quick story. But before I give that story, I just want to say that that photo inspired us to try to inspire you to think within this presentation of two perspectives. The first one is you and your loved ones as individuals, as consumers. And the second one is of you as a business person, as a provider of goods and services to your clients. And we'd love for you to sort of interchange those two perspectives as we go along today. The story basically is that 2 years ago, when GDPR was being enacted, that's the European privacy law, we became very interested in how privacy was affecting, the issue of privacy was affecting the affluent consumer. How important was it? How concerned were they? There was a lot of research out there starting to pop up that said that they were very concerned. So we decided to study it with both primary and secondary research. And the surprise that we got was basically that, yes, privacy was very important. But what became obvious to us was that there was this ecosystem, what we call the personal data economy, emerging out there under the radar, and that while privacy is going to be and continues to be very important, that the opportunity to enhance personalization, the opportunity, the economic opportunity, but also the humanistic opportunity of the personal data economy is a multi-trillion-dollar concept. And so we're excited to share with you some ideas today. We'll share some research, we'll share some trends, we'll share some use cases, and we hope that you'll use your creativity to think of how you can apply some of these concepts to your own business and as an individual to your own life. Let's get going on the journey then. When we talk about customer relationships, we were thinking, how do we convey what we're trying to say? And it was basically the shortage of toilet paper, paper towels, soap, toothpaste. Those are all very important items, but those are transactional products. They're commodities. In the luxury industry, and we define the luxury industry as a multi-trillion-dollar juggernaut, 300 billion being goods, but several trillion being insurance, financial services, travel, real estate, many, many services that really are part and have a segment within them of the luxury industry. We realized that customer relationships, true relationships, matter tremendously in the luxury industry, where you have high value, high investment, high risk, and high emotion purchases. Now, it's said that in the digital world that we live in today, it's all about data. That data is the currency, data is the resource, data is the oil, it's been said, of the digital economy. But we beg to differ. We believe that data is an outcome, it's a resource, no question. But it is all brought about by trust. And we hope to prove that to you as we go through these slides. Now, this is a survey that we conduct every year, the State of the Luxury Institute survey. We conducted the 2020 survey in the fourth quarter of 2019. And I'll share some insights from that survey today, as well as other surveys. But just to start us off in terms of relationship and how consumers are feeling today, when we ask them what drives a connection, an emotional connection with a luxury brand, 51% say that it's the brand values, it's the morals, it's what the brand stands for. And then, of course, 40% say the product or service, the functional benefits, if you will, and 34% say the brand reputation. We believe that if we had conducted the same question 10 years ago, we would have had a different outcome. Brand values would not have been as important as they are today to the affluent consumer. Now, we've conducted a lot of research, primary and secondary, as to what are the greatest challenges that consumers confront with respect to their personal data. What we found over 2 years of research, and most recently in 2019, and this is a survey from CIGI Ipsos, a very large research company for whom we have a great deal of respect and admiration. So thank you for this data. Is that in every major survey conducted in 2019 about privacy, consumers of every demographic told us that they're deeply concerned about internet privacy and security for themselves, but most importantly, for their loved ones. As you can see, 78% said that they were concerned about their privacy online. And another 8 out of 10 blame social media for the dire state of privacy and security. And a growing number at 53% say that they're more concerned today about privacy than ever before. Now, this is the entire spectrum of consumers. When we conducted research on affluent consumers, we found that affluent consumers, because they're so educated, because they're so in the world, because they're so digital, especially want control over their data. 54% said that companies should ask permission before selling their personal data to third parties. Not just to use their data, but before they sell data to third parties, they should be given consent. 51% told us that companies should be transparent and specific about the personal data that they're collecting and why they want that data. And 43% said that companies should ask for their written consent before they collect any data. Many consumers told us that they don't want to be coerced into giving up data simply because they have no access to the search or to the social media if they don't give up that data. They want it to be a symmetrical transaction or relationship with regard to data. One emerging trend that we see is that affluent consumers are beginning to see their data as a personal asset, as a personal resource, as their property. And they expect brands to prove that they're worthy of sharing their data. So 43% told us that brands should inform consumers how they're using data to benefit them. They see how it's benefiting the brand, but they want to know how that sharing of data is going to benefit them. 1/3, 31% say that brands should give consumers an opportunity to review and download all the data collected about them in a usable format. And as we'll see a little later, that is a critical component of the personal data economy. But more on that a little later. 28% say that brands should use the data to deliver truly personalized experiences. They're looking for true personalization, and not just to be targeted with ads by an algorithm, but real personalization that impacts their lives as they go about their daily lives. And we'll talk more about that and share some use cases. And 25% of consumers are now saying that brands should pay consumers or provide them with incentives to use their data. Now, when we ask the overarching question, if you control a brand's access to your personal data, and please think about this in the context of your own life, and you are reassured that your privacy and therefore your security would be protected, what would you do? We conducted this survey in 9 countries in Asia, in Europe, and North America, with the top 10% of household income consumers, both genders equal, and across all the different generations. 1/3 said, today at least, even under those safe circumstances, they would not let any brand use your data. That's today. But a majority, 55% of consumers, said that they would share some or all of their data for personalization purposes. And of course, it does differ by generation. We'll say that millennials were more open to it. And it differs by the type of data. So medical data, for example, only got 8% of people being willing to share it. But a great deal of other data did get an approval to use, to share under the right circumstances. So that's a huge opportunity, we think, for brands. And we'll elaborate a little bit more. When we conducted our research and we summarized it, from the consumer point of view, big data, the ad tech economy, is a failure. And let me share the reasons that they told us why. Number one, cyber criminals and scammers are winning the digital wars. And this isn't just an exaggeration. When we talk to cybersecurity companies, they tell us horror stories about affluent consumers, uber wealthy people, billionaires, having to pay ransom to get access of their data for their business and their personal lives. We talked to a lot of law enforcement and cybersecurity people from the military, and today wealthy consumers are extremely concerned because they think that the criminals are winning the war. Consumers also feel that their personal data is coerced and co-opted, but to serve the interests of other parties, not their interests. They feel that what is known as the surveillance economy is violating their individual privacy, but most importantly, related to the other topics, it threatens the security of their loved ones, particularly their elders and their children who are so vulnerable. And they feel that personalization is comprised of irrelevant, intrusive ads and offers. And the proof is that consumers are blocking ads now more than ever before, especially the affluent. And you get dismal response rates on click-through rates and conversion rates. The interesting part that we see emerging is that consumers lament that they don't have access to their personal data for their own private and personal analytical insights that they feel can help them make better decisions. Remember, they're making some very big decisions, or to dramatically improve their health, their wealth, and their lifestyle. They want access to that data. Many of them are executives, such as you. And so they see the enterprise. They see their companies accumulate, gather data, and use that data for strategy, for tactics, for many, many great uses. And they're saying, as an individual, I want that power to benefit my life. And very importantly for brands, affluent consumers feel they have no ability to select or interact honestly in an honest dialogue with trusted brands with whom they can privately share their relevant data in order to receive true advanced personalization. They don't feel that brands are stepping up and having that honest dialogue and building that honest relationship and that trust where they as consumers can share the most intimate data, purchasing data, location data, when I say intimate within that context of their lives, that can help a brand to really deliver true advanced personalization. And affluent consumers feel that they are at far greater risk because they have so much to lose, but they also see a massive opportunity because they have complex lives. And as we've stated before, they have high value, high risk, high investment, high emotional decisions to make. And so that's the opportunity. That's the way consumers see it. So that's their point of view. So now let's look at the corporate point of view. The Holy Grail, the objective is to deliver advanced personalization and build a deep relationship. So what are the greatest challenges preventing ethical businesses from achieving true personalization? There have been a lot of surveys conducted with B2B and B2C executives. And while they talk about digital transformation and technology, the most important element in all of that digitization is the fact that they don't have data. They don't have the right data. As we like to say, they don't have data that's relevant, rich, and real time. And they realize that in order to truly personalize, brands need the most relevant, timely customer data. So what does that data look like? First, it's single source. That is, it's accurate and it's free from multi-source errors. It hasn't been passed around. It comes direct from the source. It's multi-dimensional. It cuts across all relevant personal data categories. My good friend Richard Witt, who's formerly of Google, calls these the life streams of a human being. Their social, their health, their finance, their wearables. You can see so many dimensions of data. And the reality is that the more dimensions of data, as opposed to silos of data that you can gather and commingle, the more insight and value you can generate from that data. So having it all in one place, for example, in a consumer database, a consumer cloudlet, is very powerful for personalization and for data sharing. And of course, longitudinal data, relevant data that cuts across a time period. For example, 20 years, 30 years of your medical data, of your financial data. And very importantly, real-time data. The most critical data for many, many personalization elements and techniques is real-time data. And you can think about it in terms of health and in terms of travel. And of course, accurate data, that it comes directly from the original source, that is the individual. It's validated. It's not third party, because by the time the third parties get to it, they have made inferences that are often incorrect. I don't know if he's on here, but Julian Ranger, who's the CEO of Digi.me, which is a company that helped us put together these slides, will always tell us that even though he's in his 50s, because he buys for his teenage daughter, the internet thinks that he's a teenage young woman. And those are the inferences that are made about us that are completely incorrect across the internet. And of course, the other one is normalized data, structured data that is in a format that facilitates easy and instant analysis when shared. Related to that is that the most relevant and timely customer data, therefore, and companies know this, but they don't really they haven't internalized it fully yet. It can only be sourced directly from individuals. And you can see all the data streams that form the life of an individual. Imagine that in a personal database. That's coming. And it has to come because only you know all your data sources, whether they're medical, financial, travel, social network, location, browsing, calling, texting, Internet of Things. And think about how much more digital you have become and how much more data you're creating with your peers, with your colleagues, as we now sit at home during this pandemic. And we work and we internalize. My son has never been more in school through digital and playing and relating to other people through digital. And I think that's true for all of us. The other thing is that only I have the legal right of access to my data. And importantly, only I understand the complexity of my life, my major events, divorces, weddings, funerals, going to graduate school, all kinds of new job. All those major events of my life are only understood, and only I am truly aware of those, and then of my live streams, as we talked about. And importantly, only I as an individual know my true needs, my wants, and my expectations in real time. So Zenga might send me an offer for a navy blue jacket right now, but I'm stuck at home, or I may be sick, or I may be moving, or I may be doing something else that, even though it's the perfect offer, it's not the perfect offer at the right time. Individuals can communicate that back to brands if they trust it. And finally, and privacy legislation is facilitating and enabling this, only I have the legal consent power to share relevant data with trusted parties. And by the way, this is what companies and executives who are enlightened are thinking about it from the consumer point of view and their ability or inability to personalize. I think this quote is very interesting, and I'll break it apart because I think it bears analysis. So this is from Peter Norvig, the director of research at Google. And when he was asked about the power of Google, he said, "We don't have better algorithms. We just have more data." And then he goes on to say, "More data beats a clever algorithm." And in fact, Google gives away algorithms because algorithms, which are correlation engines, if you will, are only as good as the data that get to train on. But I think the critical part of the quote is this: but better data beats more data. So the fact that companies are accumulating tons of data today is irrelevant. A lot of that data, and I used to run CRM for Citigroup and then for a $30 billion company called Sendent, 25% to 30% of our data was just dirty, unusable. And the rest had a lot of other issues, like it was obsolete or dated, et cetera, et cetera. It's not all bad data, but data, especially about consumers, becomes obsolete and dated very, very quickly. So the idea, the quote is, better data beats more data. And yes, the algorithms will play their role. Of course, they're essential, but they are commodities these days. So let me get to the main point, which is the time is now. The tipping point is coming. We thought that the tipping point, after studying these topics for 2 years, was coming in 2020 anyway. But the pandemic accelerates it. It pours fuel onto the fire. So let me share some game-changing trends that are accelerating the rise of the personal data economy. Number one, and you're aware of this, privacy legislation enables data privacy. And that's great, but that's playing defense. The sweet spot is that, for example, in Article 20 of GDPR, it allows for consumers, individuals, to have data mobility and portability. And that data mobility and portability unleashes the power of personal data. That means that you can go and download your Facebook, your Google, your bank, your healthcare data, and you can now have access to it. Of course, it's early days, so it's a very raw, very nascent concept. But what people don't realize about privacy legislation is that the most important part, after protection, is mobility and portability. That unleashes the personal data economy. We now have it in California. We probably would have had some federal legislation in the United States this year or next year. It may move back to 2022, but it will happen. The other tipping point trend is that existing technologies, everything I'm going to describe in our use cases can be done with existing technologies right now, today. But there's also emerging technologies, such as blockchain. As blockchain matures and goes beyond speculation of currency and into real use cases that help supply chain and all sorts of interactions within a corporate enterprise, we will see that blockchain will play a major role in enabling individual data control and in sharing data with trusted entities. And when I say trusted entities, it's not just brands. You may have a genetic predisposition that you will allow a research lab that you trust, or several research labs that you trust, to use your data for research. And you may do that for free. The other important element, and I want you to please consider Googling this term, federated learning, like federation, federated learning. It's a new type of AI that was invented by Google, ironically, that is on-device, off-cloud AI that enables insights, the generation of insights, of learning, of knowledge, of actionable knowledge with no data extraction, privacy, and security. So the example would be that all my financial data sits on my iPhone. And I just applied for a $500,000 mortgage to buy a home. The bank, the mortgage company, can send the algorithm into my phone by permission. None of my financial data ever leaves my device. It sits on my device. The algorithm comes in, trains, and calculates my credit score, and only my credit score goes out back to the bank. Unlike current AI, where millions of people's data is collected into a cloud server farm, creating a lot of risk for everyone. And then the data scientists go to work and they train the algorithm, and they might send me back an ad or an offer. Instead, you flip AI into on-device and off-cloud. That is a huge change in AI that will facilitate data sharing, and data extraction will not be part of that, but privacy and security will. The other thing is that affluent consumers, as we said before, are starting to protect their cybersecurity and privacy vigorously. They see how at risk they and their loved ones are. And to repeat, they're eager to enhance their health, their wealth, and their lifestyle via private personal AI. So we believe that there will be a movement where developers will develop applications, private AI tools, so that consumers and individuals can see, if you will, can learn more about their digital twin and therefore about themselves, but in a private and personal way. And the only way that any of those insights get out of that individual site is if they choose to share them with companies or entities that they trust. And then finally, COVID-19 has highlighted and accelerated the debate over the value of personal data versus privacy rights. There's no question that being able to track someone, their temperature, their movements, their contacts, is extremely valuable to helping to fight a pandemic. But as we saw with the app that was developed in Singapore, where people tend to trust their government, only a minority of consumers has volunteered to be part and to participate with that app and keep it open at all times because of privacy rights. So we're seeing that that concern is stifling some of the most potent, some of those powerful solutions that come from the digital economy. So now let me share three luxury goods and services use cases, and I'm going to read through them and I'm going to improvise through them. But basically, they're little vignettes and little stories of what is possible from the consumer's point of view, from the brand's point of view, if we unleash the power of the personal data economy. First up, of course, is health, because it's so critical in the moment. So Jean Gomez is the CEO of a global bank, and she's the patient of a concierge medical firm. Her medical data, including her genetic profile, her medical history, real-time blood pressure, temperature, heart rate, her exercise regimen, her wellness regimen, her dietary consumption in quality, quantity, calories, her travel and other data related to her health, and her well-being are aggregated in one personal database with analytics power, and it's all in an app. But this is very important. It's with her full control, privacy, and consent. That's the difference between what's happening now with medical data. Personal analytics and human medical and wellness team expertise are applied, either in her personal data store, because the data is not leaving her device, or after the data, which in some cases does have to go to the cloud, is securely transported to the database of her concierge medical provider. With her consent, an assigned team of human healthcare experts, could be nutritional experts or doctor, enhanced by AI, develop a set of periodic recommendations, reminders, and even daily triggers that will inspire Jean to act to improve any one of her many medical agreed upon KPIs, her key performance indicators, and her objectives. And remember that at any time, if she's annoyed with a reminder or a trigger, she can turn them on or off as she pleases, because she controls the data. Her potential health or safety risks are detected quickly, especially as she gets older, and emergency care is arranged as needed with trusted partners anywhere in the world. Her personalized recommendations are updated as needed based on her health, her medical condition, her lifestyle changes, in order to, and this is very important, to serve her best interests, her best health and wellness interests. In the future, the relationships will be fiduciary. As my good friend Richard Witz, formerly of Google, will say, it's a fiduciary relationship where duty of care is extremely important, where duty of loyalty is extremely important. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So now this is a travel scenario. Laura Smith, who's the daughter of a top-tier hotel loyalty program member, it could be IHG, it could be Marriott, it could be Hilton, it could be any of the great companies that are out there. And this young lady is traveling, taking a year of vacation after her college graduation. And she's going to visit major cities and historical towns in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, and Africa, in 4 continents. She's going to travel within the properties of a multi-brand global hospitality conglomerate. She could stay at high-end hotels in some places and more intermediate level or even discount level hotels as she chooses on her Mom's Point program, as well as paid room nights. And here's where it gets interesting. The young traveler, by consent, allows access to select and relevant demographic, medical, transportation, location, browsing, consumption, and other data. This is the commingling of data to be available in real time to her assigned concierge team across the world in different time zones. There's a dedicated team because she's a high-level client. The sole restricted purpose, remember, they're not going to get all her financial and medical data just to play with. They're only going to get the slivers, the live streams of data that apply to helping her have a great experience. And that's all by consent. The purpose is to personalize the vacation in real time while providing security and medical care as needed. The experience is curated to seamlessly provide the optimal hotel properties, deliver quiet, fragrance-free, well-lit rooms, medicines, allergy-sensitive dining, and of course the fun part, local music, entertainment, and dining, and special access to coveted monuments with special expert guides, but also smart, invisible medical security and other protection measures. And the hotel company can do this on their own, or they can partner with other suppliers, other providers of some of these services to create a seamless experience for the client. Luggage transport is arranged seamlessly for the young traveler, and her itinerary and comprehensive services are adjusted in real time based on her changing desires, her anticipated needs, using AI and human experts. Now let's talk about luxury goods. Kelly Jackson is a client of your luxury goods brand, and she's purchased $20,000 on average each year over the past 3 years in apparel, handbags, shoes, etc., sometimes jewelry, luxury goods. After receiving her consent and guaranteeing security and privacy, your brand or your brands, let's say you're a conglomerate like LVMH or Kering that has multiple fashion brands or multiple brands across these categories. Your brand or brands are given access to track her relevant location and browsing data for 1 year. plus access to all of her transactions that relate to your product categories for the past 5 years, and because she trusts you on an ongoing basis. But only those transactions, not her other transactions. This enables you to better understand how she searches, how she learns, how she engages, how she purchases, and how she uses her luxury items throughout her life. You as a brand create a secure personal data pod, a library on her device or in the cloud that she can control, access, and update. She can review the data in a dashboard that is very well designed, easy to use, in order to understand her AI and human-generated insights. And she can update her profile, her latest interests, and her tastes. You don't have to guess. She will tell you. Now, her trusted personal stylist can use these insights and expertise to curate relevant, timely recommendations. Of course, they're delivered with humanity, with emotional intelligence. It's AI enhanced, but it's human delivered. So together they can discuss new ideas on future needs, and they can do it virtually, as we do now, or in person, in order to build a deeper, mutually beneficial long-term relationship. Now, these hypothetical examples are impossible to conceive or design or execute without the full control and consensual sharing of relevant personal data by the individual, by you as an individual. In each case, the marketer can learn the behavior-based path to purchase, for example, for their offerings by individual, instead of relying on reported data or pretending that a segment or a persona sales funnel is even remotely reflective of reality for that individual. We're in the one-to-one era with this process. Now, this special data sharing relationship enables access to relevant, rich, and real-time personal data. We call it the Luxury Institute's 3 R's of personal data. Most of the current frustrations and risks that marketers and consumers confront regarding data access, privacy, and personalization disappear. Let's keep in mind that the best interests of the client and the best interests of brands, ethical brands, are always aligned. They have demand and you have supply. They need and you provide. It is only when we have third parties and digital platforms that you have a conflict of interest. Our interests are aligned, if we're ethical, with our consumers. They're fully aligned. The new challenges will be about which brand is trusted most. So there will be competition. And which brand has the best mix of people and analytics and creativity and innovation and partnerships, and of course, emotional intelligence capabilities to deliver that advanced personalization. Notice I didn't put data as one of the challenges because you've overcome that challenge. You have a shared interest in sharing data. So the opportunities to innovate and create mutually beneficial, functional, emotional, and economic value become exponential. We worry about job losses. We worry about being replaced by robots. When you unleash the power of data, when you empower data, it creates tremendous economic potential. Because advanced personalization enables trusted client relationships that deliver scalable, because it's digital, it's scalable, exponentially scalable, and it's profitable, and you can achieve unimagined levels of performance for both parties. Now, the main point that I want to make as I close is that the capabilities to execute advanced personalization are available today. We've been conducting the educational dialogue as we have here to work with several leading brands. And we've been discussing piloting small and large scale advanced personalization research and innovation projects. In fact, with one company, we recommended that instead of using consumers, because they're a hotel company, let's use 20 of your own executives to begin the personalization process and to begin to innovate and brainstorm and execute. Now, when you talk to enlightened brand leaders, their eyes light up because they're craving the opportunity to have legal, ethical access to consumer data that will enable them to finally deliver extraordinary experiences for their customers. And when you talk to affluent consumers, they're craving safe, secure, ethical, and respectful personalization And by the way, they're willing to pay for it. This is going on with billionaires. There are some companies out there that serve family offices that are providing data vaults and analytic tools for billionaires as we speak, both in New York and in Silicon Valley. Now, this process, the advanced personalization process, requires a legal framework, a technical framework, and business expertise, and can be navigated surgically and effectively. So if you'd like to learn more, we'll be happy to send you the presentation and answer your questions about how to execute an advanced personalization pilot project. I want to thank you, and I do want to close. I know these are challenging times for all of us. It's been said that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and we agree with that. But we like the following quote much better, that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And I think we have a wonderful opportunity, and we're going to questions now, but I want to thank you for taking the time to listen and to consider these ideas. Thank you. So Katie?
Great, thank you, Milton. Attendees, please send any questions you have through the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to address as many as possible before the end of the hour. So first question that we have, Milton, that we received privately is, what is the timing to complete a pilot?
It takes about 60, about 90 to 120 days altogether to plan a project, to lay out the legal framework, to lay out the technological capabilities, and then to brainstorm and begin to execute in the field and pilot. So I'd say 90 to 120 days.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
The second question is around luxury brands today. So what is currently preventing luxury brands from providing advanced personalization?
I think we're all stuck in the mindset that the ad tech economy has created. Basically, that personalization means that we collect data. In many ways, we coerce data to be given to us. Or in the case of a brand, that we collect the data, and then what we really do is try to target offers at them. In other words, we think product, not customer. And we think channels, not relationship. And so the idea comes very much from my consumer goods background. I was raised at Colgate and Pepsi, where we created products and we decided what they were, and then we targeted them to people to see if they would buy. I think that model will be flipped completely, and the capabilities are there, but the mindsets are stuck into sort of the consumer goods, the industrial age approach to marketing and selling instead of building relationships.
Thank you. We have another great question. How is the luxury consumer's relationship to data different from the average customer?
Well, I think that obviously, and I will say this because I think this is important, all innovations tend to start at the level of the affluent consumer, subsidizing them. So auto safety, for example, Mercedes and Volvo did all the crash tests and they innovated, and then today the mainstream market has all those innovations and access to all those innovations. That was true with the personal computer. It was true with the phone. The wealthy tend to subsidize those things, and that's good for society. But I think that because they have so many, I'll give you an example. We talked to somebody who had multiple homes. They had a yacht. They had a company. They had many, many different complexities in their lives. So because they have so much complexity, they will generate and have richer data that will be required in order to help personalize for them. If you have a billionaire versus a centimillionaire versus a decamillionaire versus a young person who has perhaps no assets but has high income and high potential, versus maybe someone who is a nurse, they will all benefit from this process. But we believe that the wealthy should subsidize that evolution of the personal data economy. So there's no question they have different levels of complexity, although you could be someone who is low income and have complexity in your medical life. And all of this should benefit all of these people and everyone in society. So it starts with the wealthy who have more complex lives, if you will, generate more data in some of their live streams, but it should serve everyone in the world over time. Please.
Great, thank you. Another question is the conflict between consumers wanting more personalization versus more privacy. So how would a luxury brand manage the handoff or the access to data? So let's say encryption or blockchain.
Yes, I think first of all, it would start with a privacy policy that would guarantee you that your data would never be sold and it would never be used to exploit you, but only to serve you. So let's say the legal framework. And then it would require what I would call military grade, enterprise grade encryption. And today there are many techniques that can be used. There's a lot, homomorphic encryption, for example. But I think the most interesting innovation is the fact that the data will be decentralized. That is, it won't be accumulated in a huge server where it can be exploited by cyber criminals. It'll be on your device. So a brand can help you create your personal data pod. And that's easy. They can do it on Dropbox, as long as the data is well structured. And so the data can be in your safety. It's a lot harder to hack into the databases of 1 million wealthy consumers as opposed to the database of one brand who's holding the data of those millions of consumers. So there's techniques, and as I said before, the AI can come into your device, not extract your data, stay protected, and even the insight or the credit score or the medical diagnosis or the recommendation can be, all can be done safely and securely without any privacy violations. So there are techniques right now that are not being used, but simply because I think brands are not aware, that can maintain that security and that privacy, whether it's legal or technological frameworks that deliver that.
Thank you. Another great question. Do you think that personalization is accessible for smaller luxury companies that don't have, let's say, $100,000 or more to invest in data gathering?
I think so, yes. And by the way, I think some of the smaller companies do the best job one-on-one of gathering more insights about their consumers. So technology is a commodity and it is pretty cheap. So helping a consumer develop their own data pod or their own, let's say their fashion file, where they have access to it, they control it, and you might be able to come into it to get insights from that, is eminently doable. But I don't want to underestimate the challenge that some smaller brands will have. Obviously, the more consumers you have, the more this scales. And the more you can, if you will, write off the investment across many, many clients. So I would say that if you're a boutique, you can probably do this, but you'll have some limited, let's say, capabilities. But if you're a medium, let's say you're a brand over $20 million in revenue, there's no excuse for not doing it because it will pay off. And I would also say that for the groups, for example, the more multiples of brands you have, and so you have data across many, many different brands, the more it will pay off, and the more you'll be able to share insights with a client, and they will be able to share data with you than if you're a monoline brand. That can be a challenge.
Thank you. Another great question. This is a little bit more specific to, let's say, health data. So specifically, let's say someone has COVID-19 antibodies. Do you foresee this to be incorporated into consumers' data collection in the future and then potentially used to, let's say, plan store visits or events or things of that nature?
Yes, and I'll give you a couple of dimensions to that answer. First, I was reading an article that there's a company where your temperature gauge is connected to the web, and so the results go into a database automatically. So that's one approach. In the future, and I'm really optimistic about the getting out of this pandemic because I see so much potential innovation. I think that's what we're not seeing right now. So I do see that in the future, I'll be able to take a test, prick my blood, whatever, at home, get instant results. The results go into my database. By consent, they're delivered to whatever governmental or medical authorities, experts who can use it to help us all. And so I think that that will become automated. The test will become instant, and the information, the insight, again, not a lot of data needs to leave your device, but it can be delivered to a place where it can be used to help us all. I do see that happening pretty soon.
Thank you. So here's an interesting question. In case a luxury brand has achieved significant success from doing this, let's say, have they remained limited to applying it to their home or the most significant market? Are they able to cascade the same approach across their entire global footprint?
That's a great question. I think it depends first and foremost on the privacy laws of each country. We have to respect that. I also believe that in some countries where you have autocratic governments, governments will use that data to control people, and the consent that people and the trust that people have, even with luxury brands, will be limited. People will be on guard. They already feel under siege. Their data is already being extracted and controlled. Their movements are being controlled, facial recognition, you name it. So in those types of economies, I see less potential for the unleashing and empowerment of personal data, unfortunately. But in most markets, United States, Europe, I see privacy legislation and the freedoms that we all fight for unleashing a tremendous economic power. So I think it'll depend by country. I hope we can do it globally, but I can already see some economies where we will have, let's say, limited access to data because consumers will not be trusting.
Great, thank you, Milton. Another question is around the difference between millennials sharing data versus, let's say, Gen X or boomers. So given that, do you foresee different outputs of personalization being less or more important by customer generation or wealth segment?
Well, it's interesting because consumers have most of the money still today. And, you know, let's see how that generational wealth transfer occurs. Unfortunately, it occurs sometimes because of bad things, but over time, I think boomers, even boomers, have become a lot more digital, especially in this pandemic. And I think they will be sharing more data. But there's no question that younger people feel more free to share data. I think what a lot of younger people, as they mature, realize is it's just not a free-for-all. I'm not just getting free product, and who cares what happens to my data? So I think that the framework will be that we will all be protected, whether we like it or not. And I think we'll welcome it after a while, just like seatbelts in cars. Right? Nobody liked them when they first enacted, but thank God we have them today. Nobody would dream of putting a baby in a car without a safety gear, right? So I think that will happen. And whether, irrespective of what our perceptions are going in, as we realize that we need to be protected in any generation, and as we realize the power of personal data, we'll be able to share that irrespective of what generation we're in, and we'll get those protections, and we'll get the benefits of personalization. I see it all kind of coming together irrespective of generations. It's much bigger than generations. I think we'll all learn to realize the power and the protection we need.
Great, thank you, Milton. Here's an interesting question. Let's just think more from retailers. So big retailers like Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, things of that nature. Once we're back, let's say back to work, you know, stores are open again. How do you see the interaction between customers and retailers changing, you know, from a personalization perspective?
Well, let's hope that,
or digital.
Well, one, I will say that I think the multi-brand stores, the department stores as we call them, which is a terrible name, they should be client stores, right? Because departments tend to be silos and it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work very well that way. But assuming that department stores, multi-brand stores, because they have a lot more offerings, a lot more options for the consumer, and they can generate a lot more insight and provide the consumer with more solutions. I think if they begin to test this with the top 5%, the top 10%, 15% of customers, and then it cascades down over time, can begin to test their way. Remember, this is evolution, not revolution. We'll test it, but I think it happens fast. I think it evolves quickly. Can begin to ask consumers for data and then begin to personalize and play with how personalization works, work the kinks out of it. It's not a panacea. There will be issues, there will be problems, there will be awkward moments, but then we'll be able to really get the stream going. So I think just begin to start to test. And if you need to set up the legal framework and the technology, I think that over time we'll find how straightforward that is. It's really more about what we do with it. It's not the technology, it's what we do with that rich data and how we serve clients. And again, it's going to be a dialogue. So I think post-pandemic, this is a wonderful opportunity to innovate. I think people will be open to many ideas.
Thank you. Here's another really interesting question with regard to brand values. So in your opinion, what is the biggest challenge of keeping your brand values untouched and moving towards high level of personalization for clients?
I don't see a conflict. In other words, if your brand values are to serve, if you want to, as my good friend Richard Witt, formerly of Google, loves to say, and he's an attorney, if you create a fiduciary approach where you have a loyalty of care, a duty of care towards your clients, there's no conflict in your values. If you have good values, sharing data in an ethical and secure way and using that data to create value for another human being has no conflict with anything. It's moral, it's legal, it's ethical, and it's powerful. It creates value. So I see no conflict whatsoever. I think companies sometimes get a little corrupted. For example, I don't think any of the digital platforms, the people in there are good people, but I think they got stuck in a toxic model. And then, you know, when it's generating so much economic value and you have shareholders, it's hard to come back. But I think if you start out ethical, legal, and with the intent to serve, to, as we like to say, to protect, to enhance, and to promote the interests, the best interests of your clients, there won't be any issue. You'll figure it out.
Thank you. Here's another really interesting question that is far more related just to executive mindset. How do we tackle executive mindset, let's say around individuals who are not thinking this way? How do we overcome that?
I think it's education and it's persistence. Right now, I think that companies are more open, executives are more open-minded than they've ever been, unfortunately, because of this crisis. You can no longer operate the way you're working before, even if you wanted to. So I think that it does take executives, it takes courage to go in. We can help you by going in and having the talk. I can't tell you how many times our ideas have been rejected by executives, and then they come back a few months later and they say, you know what, maybe we should try that. So I think it's pleasant, kind persistence is the only way to do it. You're not going to coerce or browbeat people into change. It doesn't work that way in the world anymore, but I think some pleasant persistence, some small use cases are possible, and then it's an evolutionary process. But it takes courage.
Now, thinking, let's say there's a couple of questions that are more focused from an individual perspective. So I, as an individual, how can I protect my privacy and data today? How can I do that for myself so that I can test it and then apply it to my business?
Okay, well, I would say that today there are many sources. I would say the low-cost sources are Norton Antivirus and LifeLock. Those are, and other entities like them that will help you to do identification, protect your identity, use VPN systems. You know, there are very simple, very affordable ways to protect your security, to protect your data, your business, and your privacy. On a more elevated level, there are emerging companies that charge $25,000 to $50,000 to do an audit and then an entire rework of your technology at home and in your business. There are companies that protect executives. So it depends on the level that you want. But today, if you just Google cybersecurity, you're going to get a whole slew of companies. And then you do have to decide which ones are for real and which ones are not. But there are a lot of good people out there. I wouldn't rely necessarily on your local IT guy or gal who comes in and fixes your Wi-Fi. But there are specialists now, and it's a growing industry, especially in enclaves of the wealthy like Palm Beach, Silicon Valley, New York. You can find companies, and there are many different levels of services now. It's being tiered and segmented that you can apply cybersecurity and privacy protection at different levels. And once you see how that works, and they'll recommend, for example, that you don't use Google, you use DuckDuckGo, which is a search engine that does not capture your data and does not follow you around, does not track you. there are enough elements out there. Just somebody, an expert needs to put together the cocktail of cybersecurity and privacy for you.
Okay, thank you, Milton. And we've received a lot of questions that aren't necessarily related to today's topic, but I've received multiple of these questions. So let's go ahead and address it as the last question of the webinar. It's focused on the luxury department stores and luxury retailers in general. So thinking Neiman Marcus, Bloomingdale's, Nordstrom, Saks, et cetera. How are these brands positioned relative to, you know, in general today with COVID? How are they thinking about emerging after the crisis? And what would your recommendations be for them?
Unfortunately, I think that a lot of those brands will declare bankruptcy. Look at Neiman Marcus with $4.5 billion in debt created by private equity mishaps. You got to declare bankruptcy. Your hands have been tied for years. I mean, I think the people who've been running those companies are miracle workers. So I think starting all over again with a new owner, with a new start, and having a client base and having a source of product, you can begin to innovate. You may have smaller stores. You may have a much more heightened e-commerce business, home delivery business. I believe very much in social selling, meaning that peers can sell to each other. I think that may come back. So I think they have to really innovate and stop thinking. The best thing that any of these companies can do is stop thinking like product companies with channels. They need to start thinking of having clients and providing solutions. And there's a whole, I could elaborate on that for a while, but it's that shift in mindset where your resources are applied to creating relationships with clients as opposed to selling them stuff and pushing stuff on them. It has to be a pull model, a relationship model, what I would call a symmetrical model, equals, a relationship of equals, as opposed to brands thinking that, you know, it's sort of the metaphor has been that brands think that they are the sun and consumers revolve around them. When in fact, consumers are the sun and brands, unfortunately, too many of them revolve around that sun. So shifting that mindset is one of the first things that all of these companies need to do. But from a financial point of view, and I'm a finance guy originally, you need to shed the debt. You need to get more capital in there because that's what it's going to take. It's not going to be a miraculous, you know, evolution. Phoenix doesn't rise from the sun. It rises because there's capital and there's brains who are transforming that business model into something very different. And we have a white paper coming up that we'll share, that we'll publish next week about how to reinvent the business model. And I think it'll apply to particularly to the department stores.
Okay. Thank you so much to everyone who attended today and those who registered. We will be sharing the recording of today's webinar shortly. For those of you who have addressed questions to us directly, we will be following up. I'll make sure that Milton sees all of your questions and we will connect with you shortly. Thank you all so much again for attending today.
Thank you. Be safe and be optimistic. We're going to be fine. God bless. Bye-bye.